She introduced herself at the vehicle ramp and I didn't look up from the map. Sergeant Coles, fire support. Attached to your element for the Kestrel station rotation. She set her pack down without being invited to, unfastened her radio harness, and started checking the antenna connector. I told Corporal Yates to find her a corner of the observation post away from the command net. He passed the word quietly, and I heard one of the privates say it under his breath like it was obvious. Radio girl. I didn't correct him. Kestrel Station was a sandbagged OP cut into the crest of a ridge overlooking Aldara Valley. 200 meters of steep switchbacks on the approach, a clear line of sight 3 kilometers in every direction, and a reinforced fighting position that could hold 8 men comfortably and 12 men if nobody moved. I had 11. Sergeant Coles made 12, and I'd been told she was there to coordinate indirect fire if the situation deteriorated. I had not been told she had any particular credentials beyond her MOS. The Fire Support Coordination Cell at Battalion sent clerks to forward positions sometimes. They handled the paperwork for fire missions that the infantry lieutenants actually called. That was my read on the situation, and I did not revisit it. The first 3 days on Kestrel were slow. We ran observation cycles, logged movement in the valley, and reported back on the timetable. Sergeant Coles established her fire support coordination station at the north edge of the post, set up her laser rangefinder and plotting board, and spent her off hours running calculations I had no reason to look at. She ate with the junior enlisted, asked Corporal Yates about his home state, and never once complained about the altitude or the cold. I noticed none of that at the time. I was watching the valley. On the 4th evening she came to me with a sheet of plotting paper. She had pre-registered 6 target reference points in the valley below, adjusted for the ridge offset and the gun target line from Firebase Keller. She wanted my signature to authorize the registration data into the fire support overlay so that any mission could be called by grid alone. I signed it without reading it carefully. I thought I was humoring her. "You know how to call a fire mission?" I asked, and I heard how I said it, not like a real question. She looked at me with the kind of patience that costs something to maintain. "Yes, sir," she said, "I do." She went back to the north edge. I went back to the map. The assault came before first light on the 5th day. No warning. The valley below us lit up at 03:47, 2 technical vehicles rolling without headlights, an infantry element moving in column behind them, and a mortar team setting up on the far slope 400 meters below the ridgeline. They had the elevation figured out. The first 2 rounds walked in close enough that I felt the concussion in my chest before I heard the impact. The 3rd round landed on the south berm and put Corporal Yates and Private Delacroix down. Yates with a gashed forearm, Delacroix with ringing ears and a cracked rifle stock. Not dead, close enough. I got on the radio to Battalion and told them we had contact. Battalion told me the nearest quick reaction force was 40 minutes out. We had 11 men on a hilltop with a reinforced enemy element moving up the switchbacks and a mortar team keeping our heads down. The math was not good. I heard Sergeant Coles before I turned around. "Lieutenant." Her voice was flat and absolutely even. She was already on her radio, plotting board open, the rangefinder braced on the sandbag wall. I have eyes on the mortar position, the lead vehicle, and the infantry column. I need your authorization to call a fire mission to Firebase Keller. I didn't hesitate, not because I trusted her, but because I had no other play. You have it. She keyed the fire support net and began talking. I had called fire missions before, with support from an experienced FS&Co, and I knew the sequence, but the speed and precision at which she worked was something I was not prepared for. She didn't read from notes. She had the gun target line memorized, the offset corrections memorized, the deflection for the ridge geometry already calculated and confirmed against her plotting board. The first request was a single round adjust, a spotting round to verify fall of shot on target reference point 2, the mortar position. She read the grid, the altitude, the method of engagement. Firebase Keller confirmed and shot. She watched the impact through the rangefinder, made a 6-digit correction with no hesitation, and called for effect. The mortar position ceased to function approximately 9 seconds after the rounds in the air landed. There was a pause of about 3 seconds in which the only sound was the wind and Yates applying a pressure dressing to his own arm. Then the infantry column below us, which had halted when the mortar went quiet, started moving again, faster now. They were going to try to take the ridge before we could adjust fire. Lieutenant, I need fire on target reference point 4, the switchback approach, 50 meters below the first bend. She was already talking before I answered. Rounds will impact approximately 80 meters from our position. Danger close applies. I am requesting your authorization and calling it simultaneously. 80 meters. The doctrine threshold for danger close is 600 meters for artillery. She was asking me to authorize fire that would land close enough to rattle every tooth in our heads and potentially, if the deflection was off by a fraction, walk rounds onto our own position. I looked at her. She was not looking at me. She was watching the switchback through the rangefinder and her lips were moving, counting. She had already done the math. She had already run the geometry. She was waiting for one word. Authorize it, I said. She called it. Grid method of fire, 2 guns, 6 rounds, and then she added the danger close declaration, read it clearly, and Keller came back with a time of flight. 11 seconds. We got down behind the sandbags. The rounds came in like something tearing open the sky, and they landed on the switchback approach in a pattern so tight that the walking fire moved up the terrain feature in a controlled ladder, round by round, and the column below us stopped existing as a coherent unit. I know that sounds blunt. That is what happened. She called adjustments twice more. Each time she was already running the numbers before the previous rounds impacted. She was working 3 gun target lines simultaneously, adjusting for the shifting enemy element, holding the picture in her head the way a chess player holds the board. The second series walked fire across the 2 technical vehicles attempting to move off the road and into dead ground. The third series went danger close again, 60 meters this time, well inside doctrine, on a machine gun element that had set up on a rock outcropping at our 9 o'clock. She called it clean. She told Keller the grid and the friendly position offset in the same breath, and she was right on both counts. The last round in the fire mission, number 14 by my count, though I learned later it was exactly that, landed 62 meters from our position. The rock outcropping ceased to be a problem. The valley went quiet. It took me a long time to stand up from behind the sandbag wall. I am not ashamed to admit that. My hands were shaking, the controlled adrenaline kind of shake, not fear, just the body's honest response to incoming fire and survival. I stood up and looked out over the valley, and then I turned around. Sergeant Coles was updating her fire mission log. She had a small flashlight and a grease pencil, and she was writing grid coordinates and time stamps in the margins of her plotting board with the methodical efficiency of someone finishing a report after a routine shift. She had not sat down. She was not shaking. Her jaw was set and her eyes were level, and she looked like a person who had done exactly what she trained to do, at the standard she trained to do it, and found the outcome unremarkable. I looked at Corporal Yates. He was staring at her with his pressure dressing still wrapped around his forearm and his mouth open slightly. I looked at Private Delacroix, who had retrieved his cracked rifle and was holding it without apparent awareness that he was doing so. I walked to the north edge of the post and I stood beside her. Sergeant Coles. She looked up from the plotting board. I brought my right hand to my cover and I held it there. A full deliberate salute. I am an infantry lieutenant. I do not salute casually, and I did not offer it casually. She looked at me for one moment, the same patient, level look she had given me at the vehicle ramp 4 days ago, and then she returned it. The fire mission is logged and ready to transmit to battalion, sir, she said. I'll need your after-action signature on the record of fires. You'll have it, I said. She went back to her log. I went to transmit the contact report to battalion and to tell them the quick reaction force was no longer required. While I was on the radio, I heard Delacroix very quietly tell Yates something. I could not hear the exact words. But neither of them called her radio girl again. The record of fires for that morning showed 14 rounds fired, all on target, 2 danger-close missions authorized inside doctrine minimums, 0 friendly casualties from indirect fire. The Fire Support Coordination Cell at Battalion reviewed it and flagged it for a commendation. I wrote the narrative myself. I described Sergeant Cole's actions in the specific language that the category deserves: methodical, precise, composed under direct incoming fire, operating at a standard that held the position and kept 11 men alive. Every word of that was true and none of it was enough. I keep the plotting board she left at Kestrel Station. She gave it to me when we came off rotation. I don't know if she meant it as a record or a reminder. I have decided it is both.